Hello, it's Adedoyin Jaiyesimi here, and welcome to my YouTube channel. So, we're at that time of the year where we're wrapping up. Some of you are already thinking about your strategy for 2025. Some of you might be under pressure. People are asking you what the comes bring to the table this year. So many things going on at this time of the year. So I just thought to do this video on how to, just some quick tips on how to wrap up your comms activities from the year. I'm going to say this from an organizational perspective, and I will do another video on how you should wrap up from a personal and professional perspective. So yeah, this one is from an organizational perspective. So the first thing that you really want to do is that you want to review the strategy you set out for the year. Open your strategy document. Now, honestly, this document, if you've watched my strategic comms course videos or any of the videos that I've done with regards to strategic communications, you know that I'm always talking about measuring and evaluating. You have to be able to go back. Where are we? What are we doing well? So I really do hope that you did that intermittently during the course of the year. But very importantly, at this point, you have to go back and look at that document. What did we want to achieve this year? What were the activities that we outlined? What were the objectives? And how well have we done? If we wanted to do 10 activities, how many did we do? Did we do all 10? And all 10 done successfully? Our objectives, how many did we achieve? By what percentage? So did we say we wanted to increase certain metrics by 80%, for example? Did we achieve that? Did we fall short? Did we exceed that? You must be able to know. And again, I have videos on measurements and just the strategic comms process that teaches you how to be able to do some of these things, because you have to holistically look at how well you've done in light of the strategic objectives you set for the year. So if, for example, you did an activity that you didn't plan to do and you did that activity so well, people came, people talked about it, but it doesn't tie into an organizational objective or into something that was really, really critical for your organization, then you have just spent money and resources and you can't really show workings, as they will say. So go back to your strategy, look at what you were able to achieve, look at the things that you did well, look at the things that you didn't do well. So did you plan, for example, that you wanted to launch maybe a thought leadership book and it just didn't pan out as you planned? There are lessons to be learned from things that didn't go well. I know we tend to shy away from failure because obviously your senior leaders will be there. Oh, you didn't do this. But it's important to be able to sit down and think and ask, why didn't this thing go well? Were there factors that were beyond your control that happened? Was there an activity that you were supposed to do, but the high inflation meant that your stakeholders or your target audience had lower purchasing power and it just didn't make sense in that way to do that particular event? Were there things internally within the organization that stopped it? What really happened? And you must be able to diagnose it, because all of these forms your lessons learned for next year. And a tip that I always share with comms people is, when you do an event, when you are reviewing your strategy for the year, when you're doing things, have a document of lessons learned. This thing worked this way, we learned this. It helps, because that's what you can't continue to do the same thing over and over again. You can't go into 2025 not learning the lessons, not learning from the mistakes of this year. How would you do things differently? How would you ensure that you're getting different results? So you need to sit down. I always like to do it per event, per activity, per brief, so that I'm learning that next time do this differently. This happened. Was this a one-off thing? Is this something to consider? So in the context of this, if this happens, I have this in mind, but have it documented, because if you don't have it documented, what it means is that you will forget, and then you're likely to make that same mistake again. And you also want to have that bigger picture of this thing. If I'm not in this organization next year, the people coming or the people in the team, that you're also able to have something to give them context to say, okay, here's what we did well, here are the lessons learned, here's what we saw in terms of implementing this. Or you want to launch in Rwanda, these are the lessons that we learned, so that you can incorporate it. Maybe you want to launch in another location. So it's very, very, very important for you to reflect on what didn't go well or as planned, and what were the lessons that you took out from that particular activity, episode, or thing that didn't go well. Now, in thinking about the activities that impacted your implementation, how would you hedge against them next year? So, for example, a lot of countries, there's high inflation, there's social unrest, there are different things happening. How do you make sure that next year, if inflation continues to rise, if the purchasing power of your target audience continues to reduce, what are the significant changes that need to be made? Now, some of these things are not core comms conversations, but you can begin to bring it up with marketing. You can begin to bring it up with the strategy team. You can begin to bring it up with sales, because these things are important. So you want to think about, what do we need to do differently for us to achieve different results in the new year? How do we hedge against some of the unforeseen things that happened this year, so that next year we're better prepared, we're better resourced? And for some of you, this may be the best time to start advocating for the resources that you need. And the counsel that I always give, especially when you've achieved your objective or you've exceeded your objective, use that as a standpoint or a negotiating tool to ask for more resources. Either it's financial resources or human resources, because hey, you've done well, you should be able to ask for these things. And if they want you to deliver more results next year, make a business case for it, and you have the backing of the results that you already have. Another thing is, how do you document and report on your activities? So some of you, for example, you may be presenting to the board. How are you making sure that you're documenting your activities, reporting it in such a way that you are communicating in the language of the board, or in the language that your business leaders or organizational leaders understand? Don't just communicate comms metrics that flies over their head. How is this tied to metrics that are important to them? And there is a way to do it. There is a science of doing it. And if you don't know how to do it, put a comment in the chat section. Maybe I will do a separate video on just really speaking the language of business leaders and organizational leaders, so that you're communicating your results effectively. Some of you, it's not that you haven't done great work, it's just that you're not communicating the results that they want to hear, or you're not communicating it in a way that makes sense to them. And there is a way for you to be able to do that. So look at the achievements, look at what you have done this year, and make sure that it's documented. And I'm emphasizing documenting it, because how do you show people what you've achieved if you don't document it? You might need to have, for example, visual data. If you got feedback from your target audience, pull everything together in a very nice report. It doesn't have to be lengthy. A report that just has the highlights of, this is what we set out to do, these were the objectives, this is what we were able to achieve, here's the feedback, and here's what we contributed to the bottom line or to certain strategic organizational objectives. And please do not forget the connecting points. There's a lot of things that comms does not directly contribute to, but they are indirect linkages. So if you do not map out those indirect linkages, that links you to sales, that links you to marketing, that links you to whatever department, whatever metrics that you need, because they are delivering on certain things, but it was through the funnel of comms that they're able to deliver on those things. And if you don't track it, they take all the glory, and it's like, hey, comms, what do you guys do? But comms did something. Another thing that I would advise is know the gaps. Where were the gaps? Where did you notice gaps, either internally and externally? I think it's good to do it internally and externally, so that you also know how to plug those gaps. Did you have a gap in terms of skill, resources? This is the time to now start telling your HR that we need to go on training next year. We need to have this number of hands. And there's so many places you can get training. The Comms Avenue, we're launching a bouquet of corporate trainings for comms teams and employees within the organization. SA&A has a great variety of courses for comms professionals. This is the time to be asking for that. Like, where are the gaps? Where did you notice gaps? And how can some of those gaps be closed? And remember, document it so that it is on record that, hey, this is what we're suggesting, this is what we're requesting for, and this is why we're requesting for it. I think that the end of the year is also a great time to get feedback from your stakeholders and audience. Now, ideally, you should actually be getting this at intervals during the year, but end of the year is also a good way to, it's almost like a scorecard. How well did we serve you? How well did we do? What could we have done better? What would you like to see from us in 2025? This is absolutely a great time to get all of that information before December, because once December comes, everybody is in Christmas mode. So you may just want to really think about, okay, how do we get this feedback from our core audience, our core stakeholders? Because in that, you're also going to get insights that will be useful for you as you are thinking about your communication strategy for the new year, and even beyond that, insight for the organization as they are developing their strategy. Tied to that also is this is a great time to thank your stakeholders, your collaborators, your audience, the people that have stayed with you throughout from January to this point. And you can thank them in many ways. Thank you emails. If your organization does all of those gift baskets, have a list of people that you want to thank. Usually it goes to like high net worth individuals, maybe government officials, but you have your own list of stakeholders that you want to thank, whether that's the media, whether that's vendors, whoever it is, or your most engaged audience, target audience member. But it's a very, very good time for you again to just come into the consciousness of your target audience as an organization that truly cares, that you're not just there to be using them, you're actually there for them, or just you really do care about them. So this is a great time to do some sort of appreciative or appreciation activity. If you're working in the development space, do you want to do a dinner for your donors, for your volunteers? Please don't forget your volunteers. What can you do to just really express that gratitude? And then some final suggestions. I think it's also a great time to start asking your senior leaders and your executives what the direction for 2025 is. Now, a lot of organizations from now till December, they're going to be in retreat. Sometimes it comes people are in this retreat, sometimes they're not there. If I were you, I will be making a case for myself to be in those meetings by asking the right questions, using the data that I have seen from the year, using the insights that I have gotten to say, I think that something that we need to pay attention to next year is XYZ based on the data, based on the insights, and get yourself inside that room where they are having the strategy. But you can do that by asking the right questions, showing them you're thinking ahead, you're thinking about 2025. What are the trends, economic trends, the forecast for the new year? What's going to happen? So we know America, President Trump or President-elect Trump is going to become the president in January. What impact is that going to have in your space, in your country? You want to be thinking ahead and raising these things for your organization and asking them, where are we leaning towards in 2025? Because these are useful information that you need to develop your communication strategy for the new year. And I think finally, if I can give a final tip in wrapping up the year, please celebrate yourself, celebrate your team,